If you're looking to rent out your house, you want to make sure you get a good tenant, one that has a steady job or source of income, makes enough money to comfortably afford the rent, can afford the moving costs, has good or at least acceptable credit, and most importantly, will pay the rent on time and keep your house in good shape. I've managed commercial and residential properties for over 10 years. I've rented out single-family houses and apartment units, and the tenants I put in have all turned out to be pretty good. They pay the rent on time, and they follow the rules. I'll show you what I do so you can rent out your house to the most qualified applicants. If you're a new landlord and new to renting out property, you'll need to get set up to process applications, which means having an application form ready, having a system for collecting application fees, and being set up to run credit reports. Or you can simply register with an online rental application service, which takes care of all of that for you. More on that later. To start, you'll need to think of what your minimum requirements applicants must meet to be accepted as a tenant. Here's my minimum requirements that I have typed up in a criteria letter I give with each application. Application is completely filled out. Applicant provides 3 months recent paycheck stubs and 3 months recent bank statements. Applicants should have been at their current job or line of work for at least the last 6 months. Their income is at least 3 times the rent. Their combined rent and debt payments are within certain limits of their income. They have enough cash to pay first month's rent plus security deposit, that their current and previous landlords say the applicant paid rent on time, don't owe any outstanding rent, follows the rules, and the landlord would rent to this person again. Finally, that the applicant's credit report shows they pay their debts on time and don't have any judgments or collections. This is the bare minimum. You may not feel comfortable with these, so adjust to what you think is best. Before you even get the application, the vetting process starts at the showing. Did the person arrive on time? If not, did they contact you to let you know they're running late? How a person approaches the first showing appointment will be an important tell as to how they might be as a tenant. One thing to keep in mind is that you can't discriminate except for financial reasons. So don't say anything to discourage anyone from applying to rent unless if they don't meet your minimum requirements. At the showing, if a person is interested in applying, I will pre-qualify them by simply asking them if their monthly rent or their monthly income is at least 3 times the rent. So we both can see if they should even apply. If they don't meet that one criteria, there's no point in applying. I encourage you to have a criteria letter so you know what your minimum requirements are and that you can give that in writing to each applicant. More on why that's important later. Be careful not to include anything in your criteria letter that would violate fair housing laws. If the person does make at least 3 times the rent, then I give them the application form, my criteria letter, and ask that they provide 3 months recent paycheck stubs and 3 months recent bank statements with the completed application form and payment of the application fee. You may come across scammers or professional tenants, and the way you can tell is that they need to move in right away, like today or tomorrow, and they'll want to bypass the application process. To entice you, they say they'll pay several months' rent cash up front. Be firm in requiring that everyone must go through the application process. Scammers most likely will fall away at that point. They are looking for an easy mark to get into a rental and use tenancy laws to stay in it for as long as they can without paying. Be careful also when you get an email with a completed application from someone who says they'll rent your unit, but you didn't even meet them or show them your rental. Require that you show them the unit before processing their application. The application form will provide the applicant's personal info, the current employer contact info, and their current and previous landlord contact information. If you need an application form, you can Google it and a number of them will pop up. However, I recommend joining a local apartment owner association because if they're anything like the one I used to be a member of, they provide every type of form a landlord would need, including application forms. This same apartment owners association also provides a low-cost credit report service, which you'll need to run credit reports for all your applicants. If you don't join an apartment owner association or the one near you doesn't offer a credit reporting service, you'll have to register with one. To comply with law, if you're handling credit reports and sensitive personal information, you're required to have a lockable file cabinet where confidential tenant documents are stored, and the shredder to destroy those documents. A credit reporting service will require a site visit to visually verify you have both. When I was a member of a local apartment owner association, their credit reporting service did not require this site visit, making it easier to obtain credit reports. Also, their rates were much more reasonable than the credit reporting service I had registered with previously. Either way, you'll need a source that can provide you credit reports for your applicants. Applicants should also pay an application fee to cover the cost of running a credit report and your time in processing their application. Make sure the fee is paid before you pay for any credit report. There's always a chance a person may change their mind and not want to apply, so you don't want to spend any money before you're paid first. Okay, you've got the application. Start by looking it over to make sure it's all filled out. If things like bank account numbers are missing, that's no big deal. You'll have their bank statements anyways. What must be on the application is employer and landlord information with their contact info, as you need that to verify employment and get landlord references. If those are missing, send it back to be completed. This is a good time to reach out to the employer and landlords. You want to do this right away, as this can take some time for people to get back to you. I also let the applicant know that I'm reaching out to their employer and landlords, and if the applicant would let them know I am contacting them, and to reply as soon as possible. I send an email to the employer and landlords, followed up with a phone call. A quick FYI, an employer or landlords may require that you send them the signed application from the applicant before they will reply to your request. In the email to the employer, I ask them to verify the applicant is a current employee, confirm their start date, their salary, and ask their likelihood for continued employment. This is a good time to see if the time they've been employed meets your minimum requirements. When getting a reference from the current and previous landlords, I confirm first of all that the property address stated on the application form is their property and that the applicant was a tenant during the time frame stated. I confirm the amount of the rent, ask if it is or was paid on time, if the applicant owes any outstanding rent, if they follow all the rules, and if they would rent to this person again. You could add any other question. However, a savvy landlord who knows he or she could get sued if the applicant doesn't get accepted may tell you to ask only yes or no questions. This limits the landlord from saying things that could get him or her in trouble. If you are contacted to give a landlord reference, it would be good practice to only answer yes or no questions. I'm not an attorney, so please don't take that as legal advice. It's possible the applicant may not be a good tenant with their current landlord, so that landlord may see this as a golden opportunity to have this tenant move out of their rental. You may get a positive reference from this landlord so that you would accept the applicant. This is why it's important to also contact the previous landlord, as that person may have nothing to gain from telling you what the applicant is really like. While you're waiting for the employer and landlords to get back to you, look at the applicant's paycheck stubs. See how consistent their monthly income is. For me, I want to see that their monthly income is at least 3 times the monthly rent, as I already said. Sometimes applicants will send you their last 3 paycheck stubs, which, if they're paid weekly or bi-weekly, will not add up to 3 full months. If that's the case, request additional paycheck stubs to fill out the full 3 months. If their income checks out, then look at their bank statements and see how much they have. I want to see that they have first month's rent plus security deposit in their account at the very minimum. If they have more than that and it's on a consistent basis, even better. If the person is a business owner or self-employed, they obviously won't have paycheck stubs, so you'll have to look to their bank statements. You may want to ask for a year or more of bank statements, as well as their tax returns for the past 2 years. On their bank statements, I would look at total deposits every month, and on their tax returns, look at their gross annual income and divide by 12 for a monthly average to see if it's at least 3 times the rent. I also look for their reputation online to get a sense of how their business is doing or will do. If the income passes your minimum requirements, I run the credit report. First, I'll see if there's any judgments, collections, or bankruptcies on the report. Any of those would obviously be a red flag, but depending on the amount of the judgment or collection and the outcome, I'll ask the applicant to explain it. For instance, I've seen this. There was a collection for a small amount for a medical expense a few years ago that has been paid off. It shows the applicant took responsibility and paid off their debts. Basically, for judgments or collections, you want to see that it was either discharged or is actively being paid. Then I'll look at each credit account, see how much of a balance is on each, what the monthly payment is, and if the payments were made on time. If there are a few late payments here and there, no big deal. But if there's a consistent pattern of late payments, that's a red flag. Depending on where you get the credit report from, it may come with a FICO score, which I want to see at least 580 or higher, which is the minimum score that FHA uses in their qualifying for home loan applicants. I also total the monthly debt payments from all their credit accounts, add that to their rent, and then divide it by their monthly income. This number is the debt to income ratio, or DTI. Lenders use this to gauge if an applicant can afford a loan on top of their debt. This is probably the most important metric to use in qualifying an applicant. I use the FHA's DTI ratio of 43% as a maximum DTI. By now, we should have received verification of employment and references from the landlords. Obviously, if the employer replies something very different from what the applicant stated on their form, that would be a red flag and an explanation would be needed. Likewise, for the landlord references, if the applicant doesn't pay the rent on time, has outstanding rent to pay, doesn't follow the rules, and the landlord will not rent to the applicant, that's a huge red flag, especially from the current landlord. If you get a combination of no and yes answers, you may want to talk to the applicant to get an explanation why their landlord gave such responses. It could be very obvious, but you never know. Now it's time to do a final assessment and decide whether to accept or reject the applicant based on their financial information, their employment verification, and landlord references. If everything looks good, congratulations. You vetted an applicant and should have a qualified tenant for your rental. Sometimes it's not so cut and dry. Maybe an applicant's credit report isn't the best, but is compensated by income or strong landlord references, or vice versa. Maybe the applicant fell on hard times and was late paying rent a few times or missed a rent payment or two, but they've got more than sufficient income now and good credit. Ultimately, there is some wiggle room for each minimum requirement. The whole package has to be considered. And without being discriminatory, I also take into account my impressions from meeting the applicant at the showing and how quick and responsive they were to getting all the items of the application into me. A lot of times your gut is a good gauge of a person, so I don't discount it. Still, don't relax your requirements so much that you accept the wrong person. It can be tempting to accept the first person that comes along because there's a mortgage payment to make. I know it's easier said than done, but the wrong tenant can be way more expensive than a few months' mortgage payments. A tenant may not pay the rent for months and make you spend more money to evict them. If you need to reject an applicant, state the reason why, which should be based on them not meeting the requirements on your criteria letter. Make it clear the rejection is based solely for financial reasons or an unsatisfactory landlord reference. This is why it's important to give a criteria letter to each applicant at the time you give them an application form. They will have your criteria in writing, which should protect you in case an applicant claims they were rejected based on discrimination. To further protect you from any claims of discrimination, don't ask for a copy of an applicant's photo ID when they submit their application. If they are rejected, an applicant could claim they were rejected due to their race. Only get their photo ID after you accept an applicant as a tenant. The last thing I want to talk about are online rental application services. I've saved myself some hassle by switching to one. There's a number of services out there, but I've been using RentSpree, to which I have no affiliation. I just like their service. There was some setup beforehand, like setting up the account, entering the rental property information, setting which reports I want, and who will pay for it, landlord or applicant. I have it set to get 3 reports: credit, eviction, and criminal history, and for the applicant to pay for it. Once it's set up, I get a link I can email to anyone who wants to apply, and it'll take them to the RentSpree website to apply for my rental. Once the application is completed and paid for, I get the 3 reports emailed to me. I don't have to deal with forms, handling the fee, registering with a credit reporting agency, and the report is really good and it saves me a few extra steps. There are 2 drawbacks though with RentSpree. One is that you still have to get the applicant's financial information, their paycheck stubs and bank statements separately. As far as I know, RentSpree doesn't have an option for applicants to upload those to be sent with the reports. The second drawback is that their reports keep applicants' social security numbers secret. It only reveals the last few digits. If you accept a tenant who later ends up skipping town owing you money and you don't have their full social security number, and that full social security number may be needed by collection agencies in order to increase their chances of collecting on any judgment you might get. That was my process on qualifying applicants that you can use to rent out your house. If that was helpful to you, click the thumbs up button and subscribe for more content. If you're already subscribed, click the bell to be notified when a new video is posted. This is Dale Shin, Lake Balboa Realtor. If you're thinking about selling or buying a house, give me a call.